Well, howdy, Pastor Mark here. This week's question comes from a guy named Justin. Thanks for the question, Justin. He says, my question is, if my church and the other local churches in our small town do not take seriously having some sort of strong men's ministry or men's Bible study, what should I do? Me and a friend have approached our home church to ask one to be started, and essentially they said they were stretched too thin and too busy to start one. Should I start one on my own or join something online or drive a long distance to find something else? Thank you, Justin. Well, great question. And it's interesting for me. The majority of people that follow me on social media, the majority of people that listen to my sermons, men, young men, kind of 18 to 25, then 25 to 32. So Justin, you're probably one of those guys right in the bullseye. For me, and that's probably a young guy, sounds like maybe single or newly married, you don't mention a wife or kids. And let me say that this is the gaping hole in church that tend to have children's ministry, student ministry, and then ministry to families, but it's kind of that 20-something gap that is generally missing in the church, and especially for men. And so statistics I read a few years ago, there are between 11 and 13 million more women than men in church. That 60% of church attendees are women, which is awesome, right? I got a wonderful wife and beautiful daughters, and I want women to know and love Jesus, but it means that there is a great lack of husbands, fathers, brothers, and sons. They tend to not be in church, and when they are in church, they tend not to be giving, serving, as actively engaged and involved as the women. And so what we want to do is continue to encourage women to grow in their faith, but also it means that men are trailing behind and not doing well. For the first time in our nation's history, the majority of children born to women 30 and under, they're born out of wedlock. 40, 50%, depending upon statistics, of kids go to bed tonight with no father in the home. In the 20s, that sort of young professional season of life, women are more likely than men to go to college. Women are more likely than men to have a job. Women are more likely than men to go to church. Women are more likely than men to have a driver's license. The only thing that men are more likely to do in that age group is go to prison, which is not a real win. And so the need that you're feeling, it is a cultural crisis. It is a massive problem. It is a social epidemic. And so where does a guy go to learn how to, live a pure life, to love a woman, to stay faithful to her, to raise kids, to buy a home, to, bury your shenanigans and start to act like a responsible adult? Well, hopefully, ideally, it would be the church, and the church would be like an extended family that would help raise up upcoming leaders. And so my encouragement to you would be, it sounds like you've done your homework, is there a church in your community that does have a heart for men and does have an opportunity to help you learn to be a godly man like Jesus? If so, get plugged in there. If not, I think it is acceptable to pull some guys together and to start a men's Bible study. Ideally, this would be guys who get together regularly to go through the scriptures, to pray for one another, to build really open and honest relationships. A lot of guys are not very relational and not very forthcoming. It's going to take a while to build the relationships. Guys tend to build their relationships shoulder to shoulder doing something. So sometimes you're going to need shared activity, hang out, guy time, go do something to build those relationships. If you already have some relationships with guys, that there is some measure of trust and they do want to grow in their relationship with Christ or enter into a relationship with Christ, start with those guys. And what you'll want is not only brothers, you'll also want some fathers. Anytime you get a whole bunch of brothers together, it can turn into Lord of the Flies. You got to get some fathers in the room to raise up the brothers so that it stays healthy, it stays godly, and it's pulling guys into the future, and they're not reverting back to adolescent behavior, what Paul calls to the Corinthians childish ways. And in every community, God has some men who have a father's heart. You see this, for example, with the Apostle Paul. And what I'm talking about is here, guys that have the spiritual heart of a father. Paul has, insofar as we can tell in the New Testament, no biological sons or daughters, no children, but he does have spiritual sons. He calls Timothy, Titus, Onesimus, you're my sons. So be praying and looking for godly older men that have a father's heart and do want to do spiritual work of helping raise up young men spiritually, kind of like sons. If this gets too organized and formalized, it gets weird and cultish. You're just looking for younger guys and an older guy or older guys that have a heart to help those young guys and build healthy relationship. A lot of guys have a father wound. They don't have a dad, they have a bad dad, they have abusive dad, they have an absentee dad. And as a result, if the brothers get together and their father wound is not healed, even their accountability and Bible study can turn pretty negative and unhelpful and revert back and be just a bunch of theological debating and infighting, and it ends up being, more appropriate for an octagon than it is for a Bible study. You bring a father in the room, it changes everything. And it helps the guys grow up and mature up. And the father doesn't fight with the sons. Instead, he encourages the sons. If all you get is guys together, eventually they're going to fight, because that's what brothers do. You bring a father in the room, and he helps bring peace and order and calm, and helps the guys learn and grow up. And so with that, be praying and looking for those kinds of men that have a father's heart to develop young men. And that would be my encouragement to you. And I'm trusting that because of this desire that God has given you, God is already giving some man or men in your area that similar heart to meet that really practical and visible need. And I think if you start to meet that need, you'll see that there is a tremendous ministry opportunity there. Because if you're a guy, especially a young guy, where do you go? Right now, where do you go? Hey, I want to love a woman and get married and be faithful to her. Where do you go? I want to be a good dad raising my kids. Where do you go? I want to know how to buy a house. I want to know how to stay pure. I want to know how to be responsible. I want to know how to help other people. Where do you go? If God's people don't provide the solution, I'm just sad to say, there's nowhere else that is providing that kind of opportunity. And so this ministry is a really important, significant one. I'd encourage you to go ahead, but to do so not only with brothers, but find some fathers and get them in the room as well. So thanks for the question. Be praying for you. And if you want, shoot me an email. Let me know how it goes. If you pull the guys together, take a photo, send it to me. And if there's anything I can do to help or send you any resources, happy to do so. If you've got a question, send it in to hello@markdriscoll.org. And who knows, maybe you'll make the next round. Thanks a bunch.